Good evening, everyone. My name is Youngjae Kang, and I'm from Fordham University, Link Center, undergraduate. So today, I'm going to present about the Buddhism, particularly the interpretation of Buddhist text, Vimalakiriti. Before I dive into this presentation, I want to ask you guys a question about, is there anything that permanent in this world? Probably not. Myself is impermanent, as I cannot avoid from the dying. You as well. There's no such a political government that lasted forever. Even the Roman was collapsed. Probably USA as well. Then what the Buddha really talks about is regarding his teaching. About Buddhism, a brief introduction here. Start from the Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, liberation from suffering, notion of impermanence, karma connection, meditation, and Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So what are the Four Noble Truths? The Four Noble Truths is the core essence from the Buddha's teaching. The first truth is that there is suffering. The second noble truth, there is a suffering because there is a desire. Third noble truth, if we can eliminate those desires, then we can be free from the suffering. Then the fourth noble truth tells us that how we can eliminate the desire so we can reach to the liberation from suffering. And the how means explain in the Eightfold Path is. So again, the Eightfold Path, so-called the middle way, is the fourth of the Four Noble Truths that tells us the path to reach to the nirvana. Then what do you mean by the actual liberation from suffering? Then why we need a liberation from suffering? Then what are the sufferings? At the first moment of the presentation, I was asking you that, is there anything permanent in this world? No. From my perspective, the reason for suffering is because everything is impermanent. When we think about the second truth, which means that there is suffering because there is a desire. And the desire literally means that secular desire, including essential pleasure plus austerity. So what they meant is, the pursuit of secular desire can never be permanent, and it's heavily temporal. Let's say I have a certain secular desire to purchase a new coat or new shoes. I might have some happiness temporarily at the moment that I'm purchasing a goods. But that happiness is temporal, which means it's not a permanent. So when the happiness has been vanished, then what are the left? The left might be my craving to pursue, to purchase a new thing, more expensive, a better, a larger. So those infinite desires, infinite secular desires, are the core source that keep putting us into the suffering. So when you wish for the liberation from the suffering, the ways you should understand the Four Noble Truths, so you can follow the Eightfold Path to get rid of the desire. Karma connection. This is interesting. there's two things inside of the karmic connection. The first one is my karma is connected with my life. It says, this is not my first life. There's a rebirth, so-called samsara in Sanskrit. So samsara means each and every action that I commit or I conduct has influence into my future. But I don't know when exactly the influence could emerge. So thinking of the karmic connection between my life, it really urges me to act properly, following the Eightfold Path is, so I can have a good karma. The second pillar between the karmic connection is that not only my karma is connected, your karma, and your karma is also connected with me. Because we're all dependent. I'll explain karmic connection more later on, once we move forward for the next slides. And the meditation. Meditation is important. This is the most powerful source that you can apply to yourself in order to understand the Four Noble Truths. I just want to say like a little bit right now and explain a little later, more later, that the practice of meditation is really different from the overall practice that we've done within the secular world. Let's say I study hard to improve my GPA, or ELSA scores, or going to fitness center for having a better body shape. Those are, I believe, external experiences, external practices. But meditation is inner practice, inner experiences. So, I believe most of humans, including myself, will have a hard time when we start the meditation. Because the method and the process of meditation is so different with our normal secular practice that we've done day by day. Then what is Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta? The text I'm holding right now is the Holy Teaching of Vimalakiriti. This is one of the important texts from the Buddhist community. But Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is the most prominent and prestigious text from the Buddha's teaching. Because Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta literally talks about the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path that the Buddha preaches to the 5 monks. So about Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, what this literally means? It means the setting in motion of the wheel of the Dharma Sutra. So, the Four Noble Truths as suffering, desire, abolish of desire, the middle way. Again, there's suffering and there's desire, which makes suffering. And when you abolish desire, there's no suffering. And then the middle way, a path to abolish the suffering, the desire. So the middle way is so-called the Eightfold Path, the fourth of the Noble Truth, which is up here and here. You see the wheel, right? So can you imagine, can you visualize that once we roll the wheel of Dharma, that each roll that wheel moves forward, it will influence people's understanding of the Dharma. That's what this text, the title of this text literally means. Then what are the Eightfold Path here? There's 8 rights. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness. The last one, the right mindfulness, is so much important that I'm going to describe you a little later in this presentation. So again, according to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, when you can digest fully the Four Noble Truths, then you can have a liberation as reaching to the nirvana. So now we're going to talk about the development of the Buddhism here. Hinayana tradition to the Mahayana tradition. Hinayana tradition as a lesser vehicle or modest vehicle. Mahayana tradition as greater vehicle or the vast vehicle. So what the size of this vehicle implies is that the lesser vehicle cannot comprehend the more people compared to the greater vehicle. So when you see the definition of the Hinayana, it says, it follows the original teaching of Buddha. It emphasizes individual salvation through self-discipline and meditation. However, Mahayana's main principle was based on the possibility of universal liberation from suffering for all beings. So the huge difference between Hinayana tradition and Mahayana tradition is that Hinayana emphasizes the individual salvation. By the way, Mahayana tradition focused on the universal liberation from suffering for all beings. Then what about the skillful means here? This is important. There's two core pillars inside of skillful means. That the one is the Buddha's teaching as impartiality. What do you mean by like impartiality here? It means every being in the whole world can try to understand the Buddha's teaching. Even the bug or the animals, such as myself as well. That's the power of the Buddha, the impartiality. The second pillar within the skillful means is that the liberative technique. What is the liberative technique here? Here I need to bring up the notion of the karma connection here again. So what the karma connection means here is that you could be my dad, you could be my mom, you could be my son or daughter within the past thousands, hundreds of decades ago. I don't know when, but it could be. Because there is samsara, right? That tells us that we share certain karma between us that helps us to understand the Buddha's teaching, even though we're using a different language, different culture, different ethnicity. That's what skillful means mean here, especially from the Mahayana tradition, because it's aimed to universal liberation. So therefore, Hinayana and Mahayana Buddhism both started to win one goal, which is reaching to nirvana, but both took different ways to get there. As Mahayana, using a great vehicle, Hinayana as a lesser vehicle. So we've been discussed about the essence of the Buddha's teaching, which is the Four Noble Truth, an eightfold path, based on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and notion of impermanence as well. So now we're going to talk about the Vimalakiriti. There's four notions inside of the Vimalakiriti, but actually everything is interrelated. The non-duality, the notion of impermanence, no self as not having attachment. Two episodes in regards of abandoning detachment. So what do you mean by non-duality here? It literally means that non-dual. There's not two, but not one as well. I'll explain non-duality more in the next slides, but just briefly tells you that not two means not one, and what that really means here. Okay, if there's a two, A and B, that means A is independent from B and B is independent from A. But according to the non-duality, both are not independent. It's not two, they're dependent. So they're dependent, which means so they're not same, so they're not one. It's kind of irony. So why do we think there's a difference between two things? Like saying that this is independent from that one. The reason that we can say the independent is that we're having a judgment upon something else. Later on. So the notion of impermanence, as I talked earlier that everything is impermanent. Nothing is permanent. No self as not having an attachment. So no self is heavily related to the non-duality here. Because if there's a self, that means I'm having a desire to stand as an independent being, and that means I'm having an attachment to myself, which is never benefit in understanding of the Buddha's teaching. So the two episodes in general regards of abandoned attachment, so I'll explain from chapter 1, 2, and 6. So about Vimalakiriti, chapter 1. Again, the non-duality here. The canopy episode as not having an attachment. So I put the example as good and bad, left and right. What these things really talks about? What are the good and bad? Let's say there's a 60 people of the good people, and then 40 of the bad people are standing right next to me. Then I can say these 40 people are bad and these 60 people are good. But is this really true? Are they really good or bad people are there? Or do I just making a judgment? Sure, I'm just making a judgment. I'm not literally interpreting themselves, but instead, I'm just interpreting my own judgment upon themselves. So what if the 40 of bad people removed and there's only 60 of good people here? Then is all the 60 people in here are good people? No. My standard could be shifted. So I might can say, within the 60 people, 45 people are the good and the 15 people are bad, based on my standard, which is my judgment. So there is no such a good or bad. How about the left and right? Think about this pen. From your perspective, this side could be left, this side could be right. Then what if I cut this pen in half? So this part is no more there. Then there's no left in this pen. No, there's left. This part's left, this part's right. Then what if I cut half again? Like this. The left disappeared? No, still left is here. So what do we mean left and right? Everything we made is our judgment. It's already there. Okay, this is the image of canopy. So what this episode literally means is that the 500 youth, the disciples of Buddha, came to the Buddha for having a teaching from him. And then they brought him each one, good-looking parasol. So once each of the 500 disciples put their parasol under the feet of the Buddha, suddenly Buddha did some magical thing, and those 500 parasols converted into one huge canopy. Okay, now. Thereupon, the Lichavi Bodhisattva Ratnakara, with 500 Lichavi youth, each holding a precious parasol made of 7 different kinds of jewels, came forth from the city of Vaitsali and presented himself at the grove of Amnampali. Each approached to the Buddha, bowed at his feet, circumambulated him clockwise 7 times, laid down his precious parasol in offering, and withdrew to one side. As soon as all these precious parasol had been laid down, suddenly, by the miraculous power of the Lord, they were transformed into a single precious canopy, so great that it formed a covering for this entire billion-world galaxy. Is this really possible in this secular world? No. Why it's not possible in here? Because we're having attachment to the scale, to the size, to the temperature, to the color of every being, everything. once you apply the non-duality into your mind, then there's no such a big, no such a small. There's no such a left, no such a right. There's no such a good, no such a bad. Everything is dependent. Then probably we can say, without having an attachment of something scale or some sizes, then we might can imagine that those 500 parasols can convert into the canopy by the Buddha, which is the one who enlightened all the Four Noble Truths. There's another quote about the non-duality here. They had penetrated the profound principle of relativity and had destroyed the persistence of instinctual mental habits underlying all convictions concerning finitude and infinitude. So here, the profound principle of relativity, that's similar to the non-duality. That the principle of relativity means that everything is relative, that everything is so dependent to each other. There's no such finite and infinite. These two things are already dependent to each other. Once you get rid of all the attachment, probably we can see that how the 500 parasol can convert into the one huge canopy. Sure, because if we keep thinking about the scale, which means we're having attachment to the scale, then this never can be possible. But when we detach ourselves from the scale, the notion of scale, then what are the possible things? What are the impossible things that can happen? About Vimalakiriti, chapter 2. Chapter 2 is mainly talks about the Vimalakiriti as a human being. Also, explains the why we should follow the Mahayana tradition. And Vimalakiriti's detachment examples here. About Vimalakiriti as a human being. At the time, there lived in the great city of Vaisali a certain Lichavi Vimalakiriti by name. Having served the ancient Buddhas, he had generated the roots of virtue by honoring them and making offering to them. He had attained tolerance as well as eloquence. He played with the great super-knowledges. He had attained the power of incantations and the fearlessness. He had penetrated the profound way of the Dharma. So here, we can see that the Vimalakiriti is the one who successfully understand and practiced the Four Noble Truths. He was honored as a landlord among the landlords because he renounced the aggressiveness of ownership. He was honored as a businessman among businessmen because he demonstrated the priority of the Dharma. He was honored as a warrior among warriors because he cultivated endurance, determination, and fortitude. So he destroyed literally all secular desires within his lives, which means making the perfect way, the Four Noble Truths. So, as we learn, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is derived from the Mahayana tradition, which is in purpose of enlightenment people based on the universal notion. So, to turn people away from the Hinayana and to engage them in the Mahayana, he appeared among listeners and teachers of Dharma. To develop children, he visited all the schools. To demonstrate the evils of desire, he even entered the brothels. To establish drunkards and correct mindfulness, he entered all the cabarets. So as he tried to follow the Mahayana tradition to help people to get liberated, he never refused to visit the dirty, the dangerous places in sake of helping each other. Here, the root of suffering is attachment, as the Buddha said. About Vimalakiriti, chapter 6. Chapter 6 is about the episode of the throne, similar to the episode of the canopy. They regarding one having attachment as bad. Second is about the strong inspirational questions and stimulating others' understanding. So what is the episode of the throne here? Right, I'm going to read you the line from here. At the moment, the Lichavi Vimalakiriti, having focused himself in concentration, performed a miraculous feat, such that the Lord Tathagata, Meru Pradipa Raja in the universe, sent to this universe 3,200,000 thrones. These thrones were so tall, spacious, and beautiful that the Bodhisattvas, great disciples, Sakras, Brahmas, Lakapalas, and other gods had never before seen the like. The thrones descended from the sky and came to rest in the house of the Lichavi Vimalakiriti. The 3,200,000 thrones arranged themselves without crowding, and the house seemed to enlarge itself accordingly. The great city of Vaisali did not become obscured, neither did the land of Jambuvipa, nor the world of 4 continents. Everything else appeared just as it was before. Similar to the canopy episode, as if we're having attachment to the scale of something, size, color, any conditions of something, that will limit us. That will limit our understanding to practice the 4th noble truth, which is the Dharma from the Buddha. So here, let's say if this throne is like 100 feet tall and then 20 feet length. We cannot put the throne into a small house like 3,200,000 thrones without crushing all the walls of the building. But according to Vimalakiriti, even though they summoned 3,200,000 thrown into one temple, but even the temple, the place, didn't obscure it, and nothing's been changed. So how could it been happen? Because those bodhisattvas, according to the Buddha, and including Buddha as well, they're the one who detached detachment from their understanding. So for them, they really don't need to think about the spatial, the spacious, the color, the numbers of the thrones, because their purpose is in sake of alignment, in sake of Dharma. That's why. Then what about the inspirational questions that's stimulating others' understanding? As you can remind, the Eightfold Paths, that image was here. We can imply that the path to getting liberation is not an easy. It is not an easy. Which means we cannot skip to the end, that we need the regular basis of practice to follow the middle way. But there are some exceptions. Because everyone have different accumulation of the karma. And if there's one who've been doing a great job within their past lives, which means like the person can have a better possibilities to get enlightened, for that kind of person can be enlightened from the short inspirational questions as stimulating others' understanding of being enlightened. Here, thereupon the Venerable Sariputra had this thought: there's not even a single chair in this house. Where are all these disciples and bodhisattvas going to sit? The Lichavi Vimalakiriti read the thought of the Venerable Sariputra and said, Reverend Sariputra, did you come here for the sake of the Dharma? Or did you come here for the sake of chair? I mean, the answer for the question is pretty much simple. Definitely Sariputra came there in sake of Dharma. not in sake of cheer. Then what was the purpose for asking that question to the Sariputra? Probably the Sariputra, when he heard the questions from Buddha, he can realize there is subtle enlightenment can be merged within himself. So what I'm saying is, we cannot skip to the end, but if you've been done well regarding on your karma, then you can suddenly be enlightened by something like stimulating questions, I believe. There's last quote here. Thereupon, Reverend Sariputra, if you are interested in the Dharma, you should take no interest in anything. Isn't this a little contradictory? Because how come the one could have an interest without not having an interest for anything? That's the core notion of the Dharma, I believe. Even the Buddha says we should not have attachment to his teaching. The one thing we should do is we should get rid of all the desires. We should get rid of all the attachments. That's the only way. This guy, his name's Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the leading figure from the Buddhist community. So important Buddhist figure, Thich Nhat Hanh, and his influence in Buddhism. As you can see his face, the really irony thing is that he seems pretty much angry, but at the same time, simultaneously, I can see calm and peacefulness inside of his face. This is so awkward. I'm thinking like, if one day I can understand the Four Noble Truth, then I might become as him as well. So, important Buddhist figure, Thich Nhat Hanh, and his influence in Buddhism. So again, Thich Nhat Hanh, as a leading figure of the Buddhist community, he's also like spiritual leader in the worldwide and global aspects of carrying moral ethics and peace. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh is a global spiritual leader, poet, peace activist, revered around the world for his pioneering teachings on mindfulness, global ethics, and peace. I'm going to talk mindfulness a little later again. This is so important. Not only that he was a spiritual leader globally, but also he was a best-selling author as well. Thich Nhat Hanh has published over 100 books during his lifetime, and he's still alive. Probably right now he's 96 years old. Classics like The Miracle of Mindfulness, again, mindfulness here, Peace is Every Step. The purpose, the core contribution made by the Thich Nhat Hanh is not only the bestseller author or the leading spiritual leader about the global ethics nor the peace, is that he made Buddhism more accessible than before. Through simple yet profound teachings, mindfulness has reached a mainstream audience. With the energy of mindfulness, any action in our daily life, including walking, eating, brushing our teeth, or doing the dishes, can become joyful, relaxed, and meaningful. It's a revolutionary approach that brings peace, clarity, and insight. Can you get the idea of the mindfulness here? All right, let me introduce to you the one last quote here. According to the Thich Nhat Hanh, following our in-breath and out-breath brings us back to the present moment. We arrive in our body in the here and the now. So what does this mean? What does that mean by like when you breathe in, when you breathe out, it brings us to present. So let's try it. I breathe in and I breathe out. during that moment, I was not thinking of the past nor the future moment, but only the present. Then what's wrong with the thinking of the past and future? It's so evident that thinking of the past might be from the source of regret or source of reminiscence. And those source of regret and source of reminiscence, it's literally from the desire and the attachment from your past times. Then how about the future? Mostly the worries, probably the expectations. Why the worries and why the expectations are there? Because our desire, our attachment, there's something on our future. Then is that the past and future thing really benefits our life? No, that will cause the suffering because those two things are mainly derived from the desire and the attachment. Then what about the mindfulness? As I did, breathe in and breathe out to realize the present moment. That I'm standing in here, now, at this moment, I'm doing a thing to help my happiness, to help my liberation. That is beneficial. For example, like, similar to the walking as well. If I can walk with a mindfulness mind, I can have a better happiness. Because most time when I walk, I don't realize that I'm walking. I'm just thinking different thing while I'm walking. But what if like I realize that I'm really walking right now? Probably I can feel happiness that I have 2 legs for me to walk. And also, I could feel happiness as I can use my legs to move to the other location that I really want to go, because I have 2 legs. To realizing the moment that I'm walking. With the moment that I realize I walk, I can feel the freshness of the air, or I could see the smells of people walking around my side. So the mindfulness mind, the mindfulness practice, it's so imperative to my life and as well as yours. Because we keep losing our mind for like feeling the happiness at the present moment, rather we feel regret or worried about our past and future times. Thinking on again, probably is doing meditation. Then what's his purpose of saying the mindfulness things here? Through the penetrating understanding, we can understand the notion of interbeing. With understand of the notion of interbeing, we can have no fear. With no fear, we can have peace, calm. With the peace and calm in our mind, we can finally reach the nirvana. Then you might have questions about what is a penetrating understanding. Okay, let's think about the opposite side of the penetrating understanding. Okay, I could make up my own word. I can say a secular understanding could be the opposite of the penetrating understanding. Okay, let me apply the secular understanding for myself. If I apply secular understanding to myself, then I can never understand the episode of the canopy or the episode of the throne, nor nothing from the Buddha's teaching. Because with the secular understanding, all of my understanding is secular, and all of my understanding is impermanence. And all of my understanding will cause the sufferings, which means there's no purpose for the secular understanding. Well, what about the penetrating understanding here? I can say, penetrating understanding is the understanding that you can comprehend the notion of non-duality, that everything is dependent, nothing is independent. So, not using the secular understanding, but rather instead of like if we use the penetrating understanding, then now we can try to understand what is the notion of interbeing. Interbeing. We can say something is interrelated. So beings that are interrelated are the interbeing. For example, this book is interbeing. What's interbeing? Is this book a sun? You might say no. Is this book a seed? You might say no. Is this book a carpenter? You might say no. But try to think about it. What's this book made of? Made of papers, right? Why do you knit? In order to have a paper, you need a tree. Why do you knit in order to have a tree? Sunlight and water as well. Then why do we need a tree to become a paper? You need a carpenter, you need a company, you need a factory for that. Then why do you need for the carpenter to work on making papers? You need a food, right? To make his survival. So what I'm saying is, everything is dependent. Even the birth, death, are dependent to each other. What are the birth and what are the death? Let's say if there's live flowers here. Is this really alive? You can say alive. Then once it gets rotten, once it's died, can you say it's not alive? Pretty much not, because the death of flower can use as a fertile. So it can become a new flower, another flower. That's irony. Then how come the notion of interbeing, which is everything is dependent, can help us to free from the fear? All right, let's use another example here. Okay, let's say there's one fearful gangster right standing next to me. If I'm not the person who understands the penetrating understanding nor the notion of interbeing, then there's no doubt that I could feel fear from the gangster right next to me. Because, first of all, I'm having a judgment towards him or her that he could stab me, or he could punch me, or he could shoot me. Because I believe he's an independent being, not a dependent. Because me as myself, he as himself. But what if I can apply the penetrating understanding to realize the notion of interbeing? How could this help me? If I understand the notion of interbeing, then I can say, the gangster is not a real gangster. Me is not a real me. We both are each dependent to each other. That means I don't need to make any judgment from him. Then I don't need to worry about my own judgment that he could stab me, or he could punch me, he could shoot me, because we're already dependent. Furthermore, according to the interbeing, the notion of interbeing, there's no such a birth, no such a death, right? So if I can free from the notion of death, then that will help me a lot to feel free from the fear. Because most time I feel fear when my life is threatened, or when I put certain judgment towards something that it could threaten my life. Then what if there's no need to worry about my life because there's no such a death, no such a birth? Then that means all the judgment that I used to make is redundant. No more fear. So, once there's no more fear, there's peace and there's calm. With the help of peace and calm, you can finally reach to the nirvana. Yes, we can logically understand how it works. But is this really easy? I don't think so. Understanding the notion of interbeing could be easy, but different by person. But actual practice, the notion of interbeing might be really hard. Because right now I can say I'm no more afraid of the death, but what if someone holds a gun in front of my head and, are you not afraid of the death? I'm not 100% sure that I can say, yes, I'm not afraid of the death. But I might say, I'm afraid. No one knows. So that tells us that we need to practice and practice to follow and to understand and to practice the Four Noble Truths so we can liberate ourselves from all sufferings. So reflection, how we can develop our understanding of Buddhism. Still, what are unsolved questions and how I can solve those questions? One thing that I had a really concern about was the notion of impermanence. Why everything was impermanence? That brings me a huge burden. But around like a few years ago, I just realized that pursuing a secular desire can never get a benefit in my life in a long-lasting way. That really keeps me convinced that I should abolish all the action that made me to pursue those secular attachment, including desires. Then what are unsolved questions here? The least part that I've been convinced is the karma connection. I was thinking like, why do I have a lack of understanding of the karma connection? So I was thinking about, let's say, breathe in and breathe out. I mean the action of breathe in, breathe out. So we start breathing since we're born. And so like the action of the conducting of the breath, it's been so natural that makes me to not realize the every motion, each breathe in and each breathe out, because it's so natural, right? That's why when we focus on our breathe in and breathe out, it turns us back to the present moment, because that's a rare experience, because we really not much frequently focus our breathing. Similar to the karma connection. According to the Buddha, the karma has been connected since, I don't know, like a few thousand, like numbers of thousand years ago. Could be like 100,000 years ago. So what I'm saying is similar to the breathe in and breathe out. The karma thing was so naturally intrinsic to our life that somehow veiled, somehow preventing us to consciously realize what are the karmic connection thing. Yes, so in other words, more simplified sentences, I can say my own devotion to understand the karmic connection, it was really less, almost close to the zero, compared to the, as I said before, the external experiences. So how can I solve those questions? How can I understand the notion of karma thing? So as I said, the reason was my lack of devotion to understand the karma connection. Then that means if I put more time and more efforts for understanding the karma connection, then I might be able to understand it. But how? Through meditation. Future plan as deep dive into meditation as practicing the inner experience. So I feel like the understanding of the karma connection, not only about the karma connection, but also the Four Noble Truths and all the teachings from the Buddha is related to our inner experience, not the external experience. What are the external experience from my perspective? Let's say improving my GPA, like studying LSAT, like going to fitness center, to having a better body shape. There could be the external experiences as I discussed. And furthermore, I can say like improving my social skills to become a better social being also related to the external experiences. So let's say right now I'm 26 years old, so I can say I've been practicing the external experiences for like at least more than 20 years. But how about the inner experience? it's been almost 10 days since I started the meditation every morning. But to be honest, I usually put on like less than 10 minutes for the meditation because I don't know why, but that 600 seconds, it feels me too long right now. So during the first day through the fourth day of the meditation, it was really hard. I mean, when I remind the first day of the meditation, I barely can sit. And just like try to realize my breathe in and breathe out, but like keep thinking and keep expecting that, oh, is there something outcome from this meditation? Oh, is there something enlightenment that I can earn from this meditation? Like all the full of anxiety were appeared within my mind, and that was really hard. It continued until the fourth day. And I don't really remember like, since like fifth or sixth day of meditation, I just realized that something of the happiness. Because somehow I was able to get rid of all the expectations from the meditation. Rather, from the time I was able to realize the pleasure from just doing the meditation itself, not thinking of anything else. Because at that moment I was feeling like, oh, now I'm doing something like, now I feel something like improvements of my inner experience because I kept practicing for like at least more than 5 days for the meditation. So which means I felt hope for getting liberation from the suffering. True. Someone can argue that Buddhist teaching is really vague. It's kind of like mythical. But how about the other religions? Okay, I really refrain to compare with the other religions to the Buddhist culture, Buddhism. What I really want to say is Buddhism is absolutely contemporary religion. I mean, the logic of Buddhism is really convincing. So I'm sincerely encouraging people to think about the notion of impermanence. Because once they realize that everything is impermanent, then at least they might try to reduce their efforts to get something off from the impermanent conduct. I wish you all to free from the suffering, as you all can follow the Four Noble Truths from the Buddha's teaching. Thank you.